Hello, we appear to be back. Thank you very much for holding on, folks. Again, please let me know in the comments if you are able to hear. Hopefully the sound has resolved itself. We think it might have been something to do with the laptop overheating, not entirely sure. But what we'll do is we'll carry on with my phone. Hopefully this sorts us out. If it does not, then it's probably my Wi-Fi. So if we can just get, I'm also trying to figure out the the interface on the phone is quite a bit different, but not a worry, we'll carry on as we were. So what we will do is look at some of the questions that came in while my colleagues are working on some of the answers that are coming in, or some of the questions that are coming in that I can't see. What we will say is, I had gone over a couple of questions earlier, but what we will do is we will look at those ones again, given that the sound was of such poor quality. Please do just let us know if the sound continues to be poor. The first question that they had in was around about whether independent prescribers can use Pharmacy First PGDs instead of using their prescription pads for treatment when a patient falls within the treatment, the PGD criteria. And the answer to that one is actually one that we've only arrived at recently, because there was a lot of back and forth between us, health boards and Scottish Government, all trying to, it's a bit of a head scratcher to be honest, because in the fullness of time, what we really want to see is people fully using our fully using their independent prescribing qualifications that you've gone and worked so hard to do. But we understand that given the workforce pressures and given the service pressures that are likely to come in at winter, that's really quite challenging to do. And there are a lot of IT hurdles that you've got to get over in terms of writing out your SBARs and getting your stuff across to GPs. So make an assessment yourself. But what we'll say is, for the meantime, if that saves you time and it enables you to make that supply, then yes, for the moment, independent prescribers can use the PGDs, and that can apply across the country as well. We will eventually get rid of all the PGDs because we'll have complete coverage of IPs, but that won't be for quite some time. So for the foreseeable, absolutely crack on, use those PGDs. The second question that I attempted to cover earlier before the sound completely cut out in us was someone saying that it's very time consuming trying to find GP email addresses to send across consultation notes or indeed records of supplies, and particularly for such a city centre and holiday destinations. And that is a pain that I've certainly felt myself as well. And that's not one that's new. So if you look at unscheduled care that's been running for well over a decade now, that actually has always been a pain to try and get that record of what you've supplied back to the original GP. There is a full Excel spreadsheet with all GP details apart from the emails available on Public Health Scotland, and we'll make sure that we share that with you, probably put it in next week's newsletter. And then what we're really pleased to say, though, is that working with our colleagues at Scottish Government, we're actually quite close to getting that list of GP email addresses. It's not as a straightforward thing as you might think, not far from it. So what we are doing just now is trying to get that and get it for you and get it across to you securely so you've got it. Keep an eye out for it coming. In the meantime, we will make sure that we share that Excel list of details of all GP surgeries in Scotland, but that's a real win and really a good one for us for the network, not just for Pharmacy First, but for many other services. And beyond that, we are really pushing for developments that essentially have your interventions automated and going into the likes of the GP record, actually to the point where the UCF function within your PMRs is actually able to send direct messages into GP or direct outcomes into GPIT systems. But what we need to do is we need to wait for phase 2 of the GPIT reprovisioning programme so that they're able to actually accept those messages and put them in the right place in the GP record. So that stuff's all sitting ready to go, and everyone can't wait until that day comes. So that's a good news story on that one. So thanks very much for that question coming in. What we're also seeing is we are seeing a question here around about access for read and write access to patient records. Again, we've got some good news on that one. We're clearly miles away from that actually happening. However, we have had some support. So one of the things we do at CPS is take out politicians to pharmacies, and some of you have been really helpful in facilitating those visits and hosting them. And actually, in a very recent one, Amanda was out with a prominent MSP where the team were excellent at being able to portray exactly how not having access to those notes or parts of those notes, clearly with patient consent, really impeded their ability to support the patients fully. And she was shocked and really committed to going in and speaking with the health secretary directly and raising the issue as a matter of urgency, which again, we're under no illusions that that'll lead to direct and immediate change. However, it is a really positive thing, and it shows the importance of having these sort of keep in touch things with politicians that are in a place of influence. So good news story in that one. It adds some extra political pressure to a point we've been trying to make for ages, and we continue to work with our friends in RPS, and they're really taking the lead on this, because at the end of the day, for all that it supports our operations, it's actually it's really a professional issue that spans sectors. So another good news story that I can share with you this evening. While we're going on, I will probably add a plea for help from my colleagues in CPS. I cannot seem to see the comments that are coming through if there are questions coming from attendees. Oh no, wait a minute. There we go. Starting to see some of them now. There we go. And I've got some feedback saying the sound is much better. So great. I'm really glad, guys, and I haven't just done the same questions again for no reason. Okay. So Leslie's asking, can we work a way to get it to locums too, please? In terms of I'm assuming that's on the email list. We will need to find a way to do that. It'll probably become self-serve for those guys rather than us pushing it out direct, because nobody holds a complete list of locum contact addresses, just because of the nature of the work, and I don't think that's likely to change, but that is a consideration, absolutely, as it is with many other things, the likes of ECS access, which is another one that we're working on for the winter to try and get that streamlined. So there we go. Okay, so thanks, Leslie, for that question. Hopefully that answers it satisfactorily for you. Next question we had sent in advance was asking about, can you highlight the qualifications of our pharmacy teams and how they can support patients with their care needs, referring on to the pharmacist when needed? Okay, so that's a message around about how our teams are really well placed to support patients, and helping patients to understand that before they get to the pharmacy would help you guys with your workflow. So I think there's probably this growing expectation that actually, given the changing ways where patients are having to get to grips with how they access care in the NHS, they are maybe looking for, my goodness, I'm not only having sound issues, I'm now throwing my phone at myself. Apologies, folks. It's a bit of a riot this evening. So yes, the question there around about highlighting qualifications, so making sure, basically trying to protect our pharmacist time, and also trying to really leverage and maximise the use of our pharmacy teams, because those guys have gone through a whole load of qualifications and a load of on-the-job experience that mean that they can really support people, as you guys will know even better than I do. So yes, we are working on that. We have got that in our communication with other healthcare organisations, and very recently a direct task went into NHS 24, who manage NHS Inform, because they've probably got about the strongest social media presence in Scotland of all the health boards. And we've asked that they specifically, rather than go and see your pharmacist, that they change the message to go and see your pharmacy team across all their different campaigns. So we believe that will make a difference, and we'll absolutely bear that in mind. That's some great feedback that's come in direct from pharmacy teams. So thanks very much. It's all really, really helpful stuff. The next question we got was around about CPS doing some work on DPPs in community pharmacies. So for those of you not au fait with all the many three-letter acronyms that we have, DPPs are designated prescribing practitioners. So that is replacing the old idea of a DMP, which is a designated medical practitioner, in your independent prescribing training course, who would have overall supervision and sign off of the work that you do towards that qualification. And the DPP widens things out, so it's not just medical doctors that can do that. It's now independent prescribers, whether they be pharmacists, nurses, or other allied healthcare professionals. So yes, we are doing some work on that, some really quite exciting work actually. We're on a short project to support DPPs, and if I was to summarise, really what we're looking at is, I don't know if anyone here has been on to the university websites or the RPS website around about the framework for being a DPP, but these things by their nature have to be, for clinical governance reasons, have to be detailed and long, but my goodness, are they long, and I can understand why you would run for the hills if that was the first thing you looked at, if you were slightly curious about being a DPP. So what we're trying to do is, we know that in practice it's a lot simpler and more straightforward than that, but actually what we're doing is we're supporting some DPPs to look after a couple of IP trainees this year, and give us a bit of a write-up and experience around about what was it actually like day to day, what was it actually like, what was the level of support delivered, what were the good bits, what were the bad bits, what were the do differentlies. So yeah, really looking forward to the output from that. Amanda's running it. There's some information on our website, and you can contact us on inquiries@cps.scot if you want to hear a wee bit more as well. So we have got some other questions coming in here. So we've got from Leanne: love us to have access to person to access ECS for Pharmacy First Plus consultations. Great for urgent supply, but great to check allergies, previous antibiotics, etc. if needed. You're absolutely right, Leanne. And where we're probably at just now, for all that we do have some real concerns about the operation of the network as a whole, because we realise that there's essentially not enough people hours for there are job hours across the whole profession. So between community, primary care and hospital, these jobs are all fantastic, but there just aren't enough people there to fill them in an employed basis. So for all that we've got all those issues going on, we're still in a really good position in terms of we are relied upon by the rest of the system to take care of a lot of the patients before their need escalates to a point where they need something a bit more. And we have got a set of asks, clear asks going into winter that actually the policy and development team are working on today while we're in the office for a team meeting, looking at drafting up what it is that we put into Scottish Government and Health Boards to say here is what the network needs to operate and operate well, and to protect some of your services for the people that really need them. So that work's ongoing. We'll keep you updated as it goes forward. So Leanne, we hope for change there. So Amanda's answered a question in the chat as well for those of you that are following that. So I can't actually see Craig's question because I've come in after having lost all the sound and switching over devices, which again I'll apologise for. So Amanda is answering Craig. So I'm assuming Craig's asked around about funding and perhaps an uplift in funding for Pharmacy First. And Amanda's saying, well, look, the Pharmacy First funding has had a further uplift, which you should see in your May payments paid July. So yeah, from April, which was the start of this now financial year, that was the third round of injection of funding for NHS Pharmacy First Scotland, another £2.5 million. So that now brings us in total each year as we go forward. Now we have an additional fresh, we have now had we'll now have a recurring total of £10 million that went on top of the existing NHS Pharmacy First Scotland funding, and all that's been subject, some of that's been subject to uplifted global sum as well. So the sum of funding that now sits behind NHS Pharmacy First Scotland is almost exactly double that it was for the minor ailment service, and we know that that is to both broaden the service in terms of the services that the add-on services that we've delivered in terms of developing PGDs and whatnot, but also that depth of service in terms of the population that's now covered pretty much anybody in Scotland that walks through your doors apart from somebody on holiday, which is the next thing that we're actually coming on to look at. There's a bit of a common sense thing there that says if you're here, it's highly likely that the NHS, and you're unwell, it's highly likely the NHS is going to treat you in some way, shape or form at some location somewhere. So it may as well be in pharmacy if it's something that we can deal with. So that's a conversation that we're having with the Scottish Government, and we believe that that'll go through no problem. So yes, there is an increased workload at the moment, but the funding was very much designed around that expected uplift, and it's all going as expected at the moment. But clearly, you've got a negotiating team that is made up entirely of contractors, and they operate as part of our board, who operate on your behalf. So very much a members' organisation for members. So every single person who are in those positions of negotiating directly with government are doing that, feeling exactly what you're feeling around about your cost-based pressures and your service delivery. So they've got all that data available to them as well. So they do a really good job of pushing that forward for you. So there we go. Okay, I've got another question here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly cover a couple more that came in so I don't forget them, that came in ahead of time. So we have got a question that was saying, again, the age-old question of what is it that actually counts as a consultation? And we do get this now and again because it's easy to drift away from what that actually means. So we've usually got a three-step criteria. So a consultation happens where it's in response to symptoms. Those symptoms are discussed with a member of the pharmacy team who assesses them based on their training. And then a recommendation is made. And that could be advice only, it could be treatment and advice, or it could be a referral and advice, or it could be all three. And that's what counts as a Pharmacy First consultation. So I suppose the flip side of that argument is what isn't a pharmacy first consultation. So a direct product request that then a supply's just made, that is not an NHS Pharmacy First Scotland thing. We value the advice here. That's what the service is set up to essentially pay for and to promote. That's not to say that a direct product request can't be turned into a full NHS Pharmacy First consultation if it's opened up properly and those discussions are had around about symptoms and why the person's having their medication. Then actually you're going to hit all those points, and then that becomes a valid consultation. So hopefully that helps clear things up for teams that are having that discussion. That kind of leads into the next question that was sent, which was around about how you record these things. So the question is quite specific in asking, we've made a supply against on a standard pharmacy first consultation. Are we claiming for just are we just putting through the item, or are we putting through the item and then claiming a piece of advice as well on the service? So that one we're actually working. We've had a few questions in the same vein recently, and what we're doing is we are working up a flowchart that is in the final stages of design that should help you out with that. What I would say is, by and large, you are putting through one claim. So the advice part will always be there, but if you're making a supply and you're just putting the item through, that puts in your point for that supply and advice. Likewise, if you're making a referral, that puts in a point towards the pool, excuse me, towards your pool contribution that recognises that you've done that referral with the advice as well. So there's no need to do ever a supply and then go back in and do an advice. There's no need to go and do a referral and then go back in and do an advice. And then the only time that is slightly different from that is if you are an independent prescriber doing Pharmacy First Plus at the moment, you're clearly using your pad to prescribe, but actually to recognise some of the activity that's going on out there, that's when you would go in and put through an advice-only consultation to recognise that that's happened under the service as well. So hopefully that helps out. I'm happy to have any follow-up questions come through too. And last question that came in before this evening was around about what's coming next for the service. What are the developments that are in the pipeline? So I'm pleased to say we've laid them out. The timelines, subject to interpretation, subject to network capacity for delivery, and also subject to sign-off timelines too. These all go through a series of groups to make sure they're the best they possibly can be, and then ultimately get signed off by NHS 24 before going to local boards for sign-off. Due to clinical governance, they need to sign those off locally, despite the fact they are all identical. So what's coming through next? Very soon we will have a refresh of the UTI and impetigo PGDs, which is fantastic. I've reviewed the e-learning, which is really good. They've done a really clever thing at NES where they've just got a mini module at the top of the one that you'll have all already done before. You just need to go through that, answer a few of the multiple choice questions, and then that's you jamming in terms of the education and training. And you've got the PGD to read up, and what that does is it makes the inclusion criteria much broader, and it clarifies a few things too. So we'll be able to treat a fair few more people, which is just great, to be honest. We've also got the impetigo PGD being refreshed. It's not as radical, but it does again widen criteria and make things in line with the product's specifications, which is all good. In terms of the next clinical conditions that are coming through on PGD, we are looking at bacterial vaginosis. And then the next one that's coming down the line from that is a hay fever bundle, which will look at how you support people where you've gone through the first line options, and then there's things that they would ordinarily have to go to their GP for. So that may include the likes of fexofenadine, bigger, more efficient pack sizes of nasal sprays, or different nasal sprays than are currently available over the counter. So keep an eye out for that. That'll come out, and our intention for that, although we can't, again, based on all the factors I was mentioning earlier, we can't possibly be committed to a timeline for that. But the idea would be to release it in plenty time before that season actually starts with hay fever, so you guys have got the time to do the education and training and get the word out, and that actually you're completely au fait with it before you have your doors getting battered down by people looking for their hay fever treatment. So that's all in the works. What I'll say here is I'm going to now go to my there we go. I'm going to go to my colleagues in CPS who are duly working through the questions that are coming through here. And we have a question from Claire Mason asking if you're doing a PGD consultation and supplying the item, but also supplying another item for the same condition, should it go through under standard consultation for the second item, i.e. acyclovir tablets for shingles and a cream to soothe the rash? So clinically, if you believe there's something else to go through, that's probably an exception where you would put that through because of a technicality on the universal claim framework. So for example, if we take that as an example for shingles, if you try and claim anything other than acyclovir under that specific UCF claim module, as we would call it, then it will be ultimately rejected. It's set up to only pay for the items that come through that are allowable under that PGD. So yes, you would go through to your standard pharmacy first. That's likely to be in the minority of consultations, so it won't distort or overly skew the overall pool allocations and contributions, but that's what you would do in that situation. So Claire, thanks very much for raising that. That is one of those exceptions on the fringes that's worth being aware of anyway. So there we go. I'm getting a message from Robbie saying you're answering the questions quicker than the team can type them out. Whether that's a good thing or not, we'll wait and see if we've got them accurate or not. So Leanne is saying, shame you can't alter advice to add an item if you forget. Yeah, that's a technical issue with the UCF, unfortunate. Though it is, but we continue to feed back to ATOS and PSD, who are the ones that together develop the UCF service itself. So everything's up for grabs in terms of future modifications. There are limitations of the system that sits behind UCF and carries all our messages, called EPS, but it is coming towards the end of its life anyway, so we can always put all those wish list things in for what comes next when we're working towards completely paperless prescribing. So we have a question here from Dill asking around, saying hello Dill, can I ask what's happening with all the items that were disallowed and not paid over the early parts of the year, still getting silly rejection? So this is very much a work in progress. My colleagues in our services department are doing a power of work on this, and I'm working with PSD's adjustments team. Certainly not an excuse, but a reason. That team has been under extreme pressure in terms of workforce as well, so there has been a bit of a capacity issue there, but there are also some technical things. So what Emma Taylor, who's our head of services department, has been doing with her team is she has gone through with them and identified where all the inappropriate rejections are, and then made representation to Scottish Government and the NHS to say, look, this hasn't been right, it's been inappropriately applied. Those have all the straightforward ones have been accepted. We're now working, and there have been the start of adjustment payments that you will find on your payment schedule, which we will need to, I am not the person to ask exactly where to look and find that, but we will get that detail to you. So that's started being adjusted, and then there's some remaining lines where we will still continue to see rejections, some for slightly technical reasons and some where we need a policy decision from Scottish Government on the interpretation of quite how literal we need to be in terms of saying, or in terms of what is dispensed as opposed to what is prescribed, what you type in versus what you select essentially from your PMR. Really, the key message that boils down here is, one, we are on it and we will sort that out to the absolute best of our ability, and the adjustments are coming through, so please trust in us. We've got a fantastic team who are all over the issue and taking feedback from members like yourselves. And two, the real golden rule here is type out, when you're typing out an item or like even like trying to search for an item, type that and label it as it appears in the approved list, because that search and that one that you pick from the multiple, the loads that appear and drop down when you're typing into your PMR, that's critical, and that's where that policy decision needs to be made because, with Scottish Government, because for all that you might have loads that have got AH after it or Unichem or whatever, really find one that is written exactly as you see it in that approved list that you've got printed off or that you refer to on your screen, and you'll be golden. That'll be absolutely fine. So that's the real golden rule for us at the moment going forward, and what we are seeking to do is to make that a little bit more flexible. And I appreciate that in the past we've had messages that have been put around about For example, when they had the minor ailments service, it was always, the message was prescribe generically, prescribe generically, prescribe generically. And we're slightly changing that narrative to prescribe or type your product or label it whatever way you want to word it. I'm sure you'll all have your own ways of saying it, exactly as it appears on the approved list, because some of those are generic and some of them are branded, so that message doesn't really work anymore. Very much type and select as it appears on the approved list and you'll be fine. So hopefully that answers your question, Daryl, but it is frustrating that it's taken a while, and I'm sure it is quite difficult as a contractor to reconcile where the rejections are now being adjusted for, and actually it may not even be possible. But as I say, we've got a crack team on it, and they are making sure that nothing that's truly inappropriately selected is rejected. Ultimately, they'll all be dealt with. What I will say is, there's a small proportion of claims that we do still see coming through that are just not right. So for items that don't appear anywhere on the approved list, and another one that is a real shame is where you see, as I was saying earlier on, about where you've got the UCF modules where somebody's perhaps claiming for flucloxacillin but under a standard NHS Pharmacy First Scotland consultation, rather than specifically selecting PGD, skin infection, or however it appears on your PMR. If you do that, that'll be rejected. It really needs to be within this, selecting the specific UCF service before then selecting the correct item under that. We know that some of the PMRs have done a bit of work on how that displays itself to you to make it easier to work through, almost like a new hierarchy, so that it's more user friendly. Some have got there, some haven't, but they all have a new specification that they need to meet by the end of the year from Atos, that send them that how UCF actually has to, the spec of how that actually has to work. So you should see, if that's really a bit of a tricky one for you, hold tight, because it will be getting easier for you in the near future. So we are still getting some questions there. Oh, replying through the conversation there coming as through a conversation between Sam, Leanne, and others. So good to see folk interacting with one another as well. You guys can just take over and do the next Ask Me Anything. That'd be fantastic. No, all jokes aside, I can see if you've got any more questions, please do fling them in. We're probably coming towards the end, even with our mishaps of throwing the phone all over the place and having terrible sound on the laptop. We are coming towards the end of our allotted time. So a couple more minutes if you want to fling in that last burning question. Please do so. If we've missed anything, I do apologise, but I can't necessarily, or see Amanda's picked up a question that I've missed. I've got a really small display here. Amanda's saying, so Wendy has asked a question and we're working on the issue, and we'll get updates on the website as soon as we can for you. So there we go. I'm sure I'll hear what that is after the event, and then we'll go on. Whilst I'm waiting for the last few questions coming through, I would like to highlight something with you. We have got some messages coming through tomorrow to all of your email addresses if you're signed up with us, around about the operation of NHS 24. So you may be aware that they have had some really severe IT outages over last weekend and the evenings this week. That is unfortunately set to continue. They have sent their sincere thanks for the network really stepping up to the plate in terms of unscheduled care supplies, being really flexible. We had some really fantastic stories of close working where NHS 24 couldn't even access the emergency care summary, and some of the out of hours, in fact, all of the out of hours centres couldn't either. And we had really great examples of where the pharmacy was supporting by using their ACS access to help with a critical query in an out of hours centre. So some really fantastic work in there. They are establishing a contingency plan. We have fed into our bit of that, and you'll see some information on that coming through to you tomorrow. Broadly speaking, some things are going to look different over the next number of weekends, displayed differently, and that'll be mostly to do with the prescriptions that are emailed through to you. Your processes shouldn't necessarily change. Just be aware things might come from different emails, they might look differently, and you may get a few more of them if some of these people are working remotely. So keep an eye out for that. It'll explain a wee bit more when we send the email out to you tomorrow. But your help and patience with this, particularly when you guys aren't exactly sitting twiddling your thumbs, is very, very much appreciated by NHS 24. So thank you all once again. I see, oh, Craig, there we go, coming in at the last gasp with a, I'm perfectly fine with you going off topic. Any updates on Saturday closures to continue or not? So short answer is no, not at this moment in time. Are there any updates on that? Very much local board decisions with local community pharmacy health boards. I think what we would expect to happen there is probably a review, given that we're now through most of the summer holiday period, but accepting we still have workforce issues and absence issues continuing and will continue for the foreseeable. I would expect there to be a review of the effectiveness of those measures, and a review of any unintended consequences, and then decisions will be made on that as to whether that can or should continue and go forward with that. And certainly at CPS, we're very much a national body that work on your behalf on national issues, and those are, whilst common to most health boards, the decision can only be made locally. But we are very much in and around the issue, monitoring and supporting where we can with all of that. So I appreciate that's a little bit of a non-answer there, Craig, but there's a bit of work to be done before that decision can really be made, and it certainly doesn't sit with us, unfortunately. But what I will say is we've had some really fantastic joint working with health boards, being pragmatic, understanding, listening around about the situation out there, because at the end of the day it's very clear to see that it's becoming increasingly difficult to source employed pharmacists, and indeed pharmacy team members to run services consistently. And if one thing is true, it is that planned closures are far preferable to the chaos of unplanned closures. And that would probably end that my comment on that point. So I don't see any further questions coming through at the moment. So what I propose to say is, as we always with these things, the time has absolutely flown in. 45 minutes already, albeit 10 minutes of that were spent with me fumbling about moving between devices. So yeah, it looks like I've just had confirmed from the team there are no more questions coming through, so we can wrap up with that this evening. Please go out, enjoy the rest of the sunshine, put your feet up after a hard day in the coal face, and we will see you at our next event. Thanks very much and take care, folks. Bye.